Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating periods in history, the French Revolution. And to help us unpack all of it, I've got an expert with me.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here to delve into this captivating and really complex period of history.
Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future deep dives.
Yeah.
Okay, so French Revolution, where do we even begin? I mean, how does a society built on like centuries of tradition just erupt into, this massive upheaval?
Well, to really grasp the how and the why, we've got to first set the stage right. We need to understand France before the revolution.
Okay, so pre-revolution France, what's the scene?
Think absolute monarchy, a system where the king's word was law, like literally law. And this wasn't just some random idea they came up with. It was backed by, get this, the divine right of kings.
Divine right, like the king is chosen by God.
Exactly. They believed the monarch's authority came straight from God, not from the people they ruled. A good example of this is King James I of England. He was a big believer in this whole divine right thing.
So basically, the king answers only to God, not the people.
Yep. And that idea was like super widespread across Europe. It really reinforced the absolute power of monarchs. And in France, this power was like woven into the fabric of society through this thing called the seigneurial system.
Seigneurial system. Break that down for me.
Basically, it's a feudal structure, kind of like medieval times, where peasants worked land owned by nobles. And guess what? Their birth pretty much determined their entire life. Not exactly a system that fosters equality and happiness, right?
No, not really. Sounds like a recipe for resentment.
Oh, absolutely. And then into this already kind of tense situation comes Louis XIV. You might know him as the Sun King.
The Sun King, yeah. Didn't he rule for a really long time?
72 years. He centralized power, reduced the influence of the nobility, but also engaged in like constant warfare, lots of big fancy palaces and a lot of battles.
Sounds expensive.
It was. And all of that led to a massive mountain of debt, a debt that would burden France for generations. His successor, Louis XV, didn't do much better. He dragged France into the Seven Years' War.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't that a pretty big global conflict?
Huge. And it totally drained French resources, resulted in major colonial losses, and you guessed it, more debt.
So we've got a growing financial crisis, a lot of resentment bubbling under the surface,
Mm.
and a monarchy that seems kind of out of touch with, the average person.
You got it. And this is where the whole structure of French society really comes into play. You've got the three estates: the first estate, the clergy; the second estate, the
Uh-oh.
nobility; and the third estate. Well, that's everyone else.
Everyone else.
Literally everyone else. Peasants, merchants, artisans, the vast majority of the population, all crammed into one category.
Uh-oh. I sense some serious inequality brewing here.
Right. Now, their legislative body was the Estates General. And here's the kicker: each estate got one vote. So guess who consistently got outvoted?
I'm guessing the third estate. The ones paying the bulk of the taxes, dealing with crop failures, and, actually working.
Bingo. And their grievances, they just kept piling up. Talk about a powder keg of frustration. And then into this already volatile mix, we introduce some, let's call them revolutionary ideas from across the
Right.
Atlantic.
The American Revolution. Knew it had to play a role.
Right. The American Revolution was like this beacon of hope for many in France. It showed them a nation throwing off the shackles of monarchy, declaring independence, establishing a government based on the will of the people.
So basically, French citizens see this and think, hey, we could do that too.
Exactly. Especially with figures like the Marquis de Lafayette fighting alongside the Americans, bringing those revolutionary ideals back home. But meanwhile, back in France, the financial crisis was getting worse by the day. What was Louis XVI doing about it?
I don't know, throw more parties.
He appointed a finance minister, a guy named Jacques Necker, who actually recognized how bad things were. He proposed reforms, even a tax on property that would, get this, affect the nobility and clergy.
Whoa, whoa. Taxing the privilege. That must have gone over well.
You can imagine, right? The first and second estates were not happy. And so, in a desperate move to find some kind of solution, Louis XVI did something that would change the course of history. He called a meeting of the Estates General in 1789.
Wait, hadn't they met in a while?
Over 175 years. You can only imagine the tension in that room, right? Three estates, all with their own agendas, their own resentments. And of course, controversy erupts almost immediately over the voting system.
The third estate is probably not thrilled with the one estate, one vote system.
You think? They demanded that voting be by head count, actually reflect the population. But their demands.
Yeah.
Rejected. It was a powder keg, and someone had just lit the fuse. The French Revolution was about to explode.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we left off with France, on the brink of some major change. Remember the Estates General, like a pressure cooker about to explode?
Yeah, and all eyes were on the Third Estate.
And they did not disappoint. It's June 17th, 1789, and the Third Estate, bam, declares themselves the National Assembly. Talk about a power move.
So they're saying we're the ones who really represent the people.
Exactly. And that was like a direct challenge to the king, to the whole system.
What did Louis XVI do?
He tries to shut them down, like literally locks them out of their meeting hall.
Talk about escalating things. What did the National Assembly do?
They find a new spot, a nearby indoor tennis court, and they take this oath, the famous tennis court oath. They vow not to disband until France has a constitution.
But tennis court oath. That's like revolutionary iconography 101. Did Louis XVI cave? Eventually, yeah. He was forced to recognize the National Assembly. A win for the Third Estate, but man, things were just getting started.
What else was brewing?
Well, the economic crisis was getting worse. Food shortages, prices going up, people out of work. Early July, riots break out in Paris.
People are hungry. They're angry.
And then Louis XVI does something else that really stirs the pot. He dismisses Jacques Necker, the finance minister,
The guy who is at least trying to make things better.
the one who actually understood the people's struggles. So then, July 14th, 1789, a Parisian mob storms the Bastille.
The storming of the Bastille. I mean, everyone knows about that. But what made the Bastille such a big deal?
It was this royal fortress, a prison. It represented like the king's power, oppression. Capturing it was a turning point.
Like a symbol that things were really changing.
Big time. And this unrest, it wasn't just in Paris. This wave of peasant uprisings, what they call the Great Fear, starts spreading through the countryside. Peasants are attacking manor houses, destroying records. The whole feudal order is being challenged.
Wow, so things are changing everywhere. What's the National Assembly doing in the middle of all of this?
They're busy, man. They're trying to build a new France. August 27th, 1789, they adopt the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen.
Okay, that's a big one.
Hugely influential, it lays out these fundamental rights for all citizens: liberty, equality, freedom of speech, religion, property rights. It was a total rejection of everything the monarchy stood for.
The foundation for a new society.
Totally. But the revolution, it's far from over. The economy is still a mess. October 1789, thousands of women, they march from Paris to Versailles.
What were they after?
Bread. They were demanding bread. They're also forcing Louis XVI and the whole royal family to come back to Paris.
They marched all the way to Versailles for bread.
Wow. It shows you how desperate things were, and also shows you the power of the people. They're not just sitting back, they're shaping the revolution.
So the king and his family are back in Paris, essentially prisoners.
Yeah.
How does the National Assembly deal with the, ever-present financial crisis?
They take a really drastic step. They confiscate and sell off church lands.
The church. That had to be controversial.
It was, but they needed money, and the church was wealthy. And they don't stop there. They pass the civil constitution of the clergy. Basically, clergy had to swear an oath of loyalty to the state.
So they're bringing the church under state control.
Yep. Which alienated a lot of devout Catholics, obviously.
Uh-huh.
And in the middle of all this, June 1791, Louis XVI, he tries to escape France with his family.
It tries to run.
They get caught in Varennes, a town near the border. This escape attempt, it was a huge mistake, made him look like an enemy of the revolution.
Okay, so now we got the revolution in full swing. Louis XVI is a prisoner, and there's a lot of uncertainty. What happens next?
Welcome back to our deep dive. So we left off with the king, basically a prisoner of his own revolution.
Yeah, trying to sneak out of the country.
Yeah.
Not a good look.
But it wasn't just France dealing with all of this drama. What was happening outside of France? Things were getting pretty tense across Europe. Other monarchs, they were watching all of this unfold, and they were getting nervous.
I can imagine. Hey, if they can overthrow the king in France, what's stopping our people from getting any ideas?
Exactly. So Austria and Prussia, they issue this thing called the Declaration of Pillnitz in August 1791. Basically, they're saying, hey, France, back off or we're going to step in.
That's not going to calm things down.
Nope. If anything, it just makes the revolutionaries more determined, more defiant. They see it as foreign powers meddling in their business.
Okay, so the revolution goes from internal reforms to Like an international standoff. Did it actually lead to war?
Oh, yeah. April 1792, France declares war on Austria, the start of what's called the War of the First Coalition.
So now it's not just about bread and taxes anymore.
The stakes are way higher now, and the war just adds to the chaos, fuels the rise of these radical factions. You've got the sans-culottes, the working class radicals in Paris. They're pushing for a republic. They want the monarchy gone, period.
They're done messing around.
And their demands, they get louder and louder. August 1792, a mob storms the Tuileries Palace where the royal family was staying.
So Louis XVI is basically running from mob to mob at this point.
Right. It was the end of the monarchy, basically.
Right.
The Legislative Assembly couldn't hold things together. A new governing body, the National Convention, they're elected. And September 21st, 1792, they do it. They abolish the monarchy. France is a republic now.
A republic. Man, that's huge.
They even create a new calendar, year one of the Republic, a total break from the past. But a revolution's never simple.
There's always another twist.
The National Convention, it was full of different factions, different ideas about what the revolution should be. You've got the Girondins, a more moderate group. Then there's the Jacobins, led by some pretty intense figures, guys like Jean-Paul Marat, Georges Danton, and of course, Maximilien
Oh,
Robespierre.
that name's pretty much synonymous with the Reign of Terror.
Yeah. This is where things get really dark. The revolution had its ideals, but it also had its brutality.
And the guillotine becomes the symbol of that.
It was supposed to be a more humane way of executing people, but it became this terrifying instrument of revolutionary justice.
And Louis XVI, he ends up meeting his end on the guillotine.
January 1793, convicted of treason. And the reasons for the violence? Well, France is facing enemies everywhere. Internal rebellions, counter-revolutionaries, the war. It was a time of fear, of paranoia. So the National Convention, they create the Committee of Public Safety.
It's kind of ominous.
It was. They had almost unlimited power to deal with the crisis. And with Robespierre leading the charge, well, that's when the Reign of Terror begins.
From July 1793 to July 1794.
Anyone suspected of being an enemy of the revolution, they could be arrested, tried, executed, all within a matter of days.
It was a time of absolute terror. No one was safe. Marie Antoinette, even she wasn't spared.
The Reign of Terror, it's a complicated thing. A mix of fear, war, revolutionary fervor, a dark chapter, a reminder that ideals can be twisted.
But it did eventually end.
Yeah, even Robespierre's allies, they eventually turn on him. July 1794, Robespierre is overthrown, executed. The Reign of Terror is over.
So what happens to France after all of that? Did they find some peace, some stability?
Not quite. The Thermidorian reaction, that's what they call this period after the terror. The Committee of Public Safety is gone. They try to move away from those radical Jacobin policies. A new constitution in 1795, they set up the Directory, a five-man executive body.
And did that work?
Not really. They had tons of problems. The economy was still a mess. There were still wars going on, corruption, political infighting. It was rough.
So we go from absolute monarchy to republic, public to reign of terror, and now this, like, struggling government. What happens next?
Well, that's where a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte enters the scene.
Napoleon. I knew he had to show up somewhere.
This guy, brilliant military strategist, charismatic leader, sees his opportunity. 1799, he stages a coup, overthrows the Directory, sets up the consulate, and guess who's the first consul?
Napoleon. So the revolution that started with all these hopes for liberty and equality, it ends with an emperor. Man, that's history for you.
The French Revolution, it's a wild ride, full of contradictions, unexpected turns. It's a story of upheaval, violence, and ultimately transformation.
It shows you that revolutions, they're messy, they're unpredictable, and they don't always end up where you think they will. But the French Revolution, it changed the world. It destroyed the old order, it spread ideas of liberty and equality, and it inspired other revolutions for centuries to come.
And it still has something to teach us today about the power of ideas, about the fight for freedom and justice, about how complicated history really is.
Well, everyone, that's our deep dive into the French Revolution. From the Sun King to the storming of the Bastille to the Reign of Terror to the rise of Napoleon. We've covered a lot of ground. If you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button and we'll see you on the next deep dive.